toda a gente é dono de um pedaço de terra. Médicos e engenheiros é o que há mais por aqui. Classe trabalhadora, definitivamente dos Estados vizinhos. E classe média, talvez os goeses que emigraram para o Canadá ou para a Inglaterra. Mas afinal, o que é que Goa tem tão especial para ter dado uma estrutura social tão diferente do resto da Índia? E podemos mesmo dizer do resto do mundo. De facto, existiu em tempos milenares um sistema comunitário de administração do território que talvez nos possa dar algumas pistas para este mistério. Procuramos falar com advogados, professores, cientistas, donos de terra e abordar esta questão sobre a terra que tem dado tanto que falar nos últimos tempos.
We are on the bank of Kushavati river. The river which was flowing perhaps before the man came on this earth. And this is our oldest heritage, I can say. When the man came over here and found this area bountiful with fruits, with wild animals to hunt, and water to drink and a good environment, they might have settled over here. And while settling, slowly the culture, maybe the culture of their primitive culture came up. And in that culture, animals, plants had a greater relevance. So you find here a lot of animals being carved out. Then there are figures which are mystical figures. We do not know what they mean. But it is said from the other places where similar rock carvings are found, this can be rated between 6,000 to 3,000 years from today.
The first people who came to Goa were via the Western Ghats or the hilly regions. They were the Dhangar communities or the shepherd community, and they came in search of pastures and water. They were followed by Gauda communities, who again came by the hilly region, and they were the first settlers of Goa. Gauda community is the community which shifted from hunting and food gathering to the agricultural communities, and they had a communitarian mode of life.
The establishment of Gaonkari or Kumdaj was an organized way of occupying land.
You will find that Goa never bothered to form a state. There was no state formation in Goa. There was no dynasty of a Goan origin, because Goans never thought that they should raise an army and invade other territories and go for loot and plunder and increase their area, geographical area, and annex other this one and subjugate other communities. That was not the concept at all, because they were self-reliant. They were managing their natural resources in a very sustainable manner even before Boyle discovered the meaning of sustainability.
Now, agriculture in Goa required comprehensive knowledge of tides. It is monsoon based, so it required comprehensive knowledge of tides, currents, geomorphology, hydrogeology, climate, etc. So this required division of labor, and the Gauda community realized it. They recognized, and therefore they started this communitarian the mode of operating agriculture in Goa. So they were the community who practiced burn and shift cultivation, the Kumeri cultivation. The settlers who came later, they were mostly Brahmins and Kshatriyas. They had weapons with them, so they could cut the mangrove forest in the coastal areas, which were wet, and Gauda communities could not burn them because they were wet tidal forest. So the Brahmin and the Kshatriyas who followed later could cut the mangroves forest in the coastal areas, and they could put the coastal forest to productive use. They were influenced by Gauda's communitarian way of life.
Comunidades are of very ancient origin. In fact, they are institutions which are local institutions, Probably they are parallel to caste panchayats and panchayats of India. But the Portuguese writers considered them like the Greek republics. So in their writings, all the Portuguese historians, Goan historians, refer to comunidades like Greek city-states. So the village community, every year or 3 years, depending, gathered together and leased out the lands to various people who were ready to till the land. So they took the money from that. The auction was carried out. They took and collected the money and kept this money. Some of it was used for making some works within the village. There were a lot of duties also to the Gaonkariya system to maintain the pagoda, to maintain later it became to maintain the church, to maintain certain officials like barber, smithy, washerman. Some people were to be maintained by the comunidad. So the whole village system was very rural, economic was very primary type of economy, agricultural based, and in that this system survived.
They were culturally sustainable, they were ecologically sustainable, they were socially sustainable, and they were economically sustainable.
A Gaonkar has a zone. Zone means something which is hereditary. He will get the income from that village community. Whatever is the excess, the profits will be distributed among the Gaonkars.
As pessoas que são oriundas desta aldeia têm todos os anos uma espécie de dividendo que se chama jonos, que o filho mais velho de cada família tem direito a esses jonos. Vê aqui estes canteiros, são arrendados. Dessa receita, uma parte é utilizada para a administração e outra parte é realmente para ser dividido pelos jonoeiros das famílias locais.
In each village, the village community itself, they selected the body. They had annual meetings for which they took a small body, composed a body. President was there and some attorney, what is called comunidad attorney, and some 2-3 people were there and some others, and they gathered every Sunday or every monthly meetings were held so that they checked up whatever the decisions of the comunidad. Right from ancient time, the comunidades functioned by taking decisions in the village communities. They were known as nemos in 1526 code. Nemos means a kind of a vote.
The village communities used to sit around some tree and some common place, used to take their decisions together. It was a sort of a quasi-democratic system.
These bodies had their own rules and governing system, which was compiled by the Portuguese, fortunately for us, in 1526. So we have a recorded statement of what was happening there.
Nas monarquias europeias, como a inglesa, a terra pertenceu sempre à coroa e à aristocracia. Mas em regimes como o da União Soviética, a terra pertenceu sempre integralmente ao Estado, assistindo-se ultimamente a uma privatização da propriedade. Curiosamente, aqui em Goa, a terra durante milhares de anos pertenceu aos goeses, e não só aos goeses mais abastados, mas a todos os goeses. E apesar deste sistema milenar comunitário em que sempre tem vivido, ter vindo a deteriorar-se, parece não querer morrer. E tudo devido à palavra de um português que há 500 anos atrás se tornou famoso quando conquistou Goa para o Império Português. Estamos a falar de, exatamente, Afonso de Albuquerque.
For all dos Gaonkaris e lavradores desta ilha de Goa e outras anexas a elas. This is a very important compilation. It is considered by Goans as a Magna Carta of the promises made by Afonso de Albuquerque to maintain uses and customs of the Goans.
Taxes were decided differently from time to time. Actually, the taxes started by Hindu rulers during Kadamba time and all. 1/3 of the revenue was to be given as tax.
The same thing was promised to the Portuguese rulers when they entered through your Albuquerque. Alfonso Albuquerque, he said, okay, you were giving this to the previous ruler. Before Adil Shah, there was some Kadamba rulers. They were, by custom, they were entitled for this sum from your output. Same way, let it be given to us. We will give you same protection, same interest, and preserve your laws.
The Hindus of Goa, the landlords, the Brahmins and all that, were wanted the Portuguese, not because they had any problem with the Muslims. who were here, Bijapur. But the taxes were very high. And that they were very arrogant. They would not accept the pedigrees of these Goan Brahmins. So, partly for the prestige, partly for the taxes, that they convinced Albuquerque to come here.
They were invited to protect us from the Muslim rule. If you see 1510, they didn't come as warriors and attacked Goa. They were invited. If you see, that invitation is on bilateral treaty. You preserve my culture and I will give you so much.
During Portuguese time, this whole Gaonkari system achieved legitimacy, formal legitimacy through Code of Comunidades.
You have lot of conversion taking place, and the lands which were with the temples passed on to the church.
The state interference also started in the administrative work of comunidades.
Administrador was basically a government looking after, inquiring whether something was going wrong. He had no powers as such. His powers were just like supervisory powers, to check up no fraud took up and all that, so that he protects the interests of all others. Now this type of administrador can become very powerful when the system is not working. People are not having meetings, you are not checking the code, you are not checking the rules and regulations, whether he follows or not you don't know. Then he becomes an appointee of the government. When the government wants to take some land, they appoint a person who will help them in this particular deal.
The revenue collected from khazans through cultivation of rights was not only used for the maintenance of khazan lands, but it was also put to use for civic functions as well as religious temples, maintenance of churches. So khazans were taxed, the comunidades basically were taxed because of this.
They were made to construct roads. Very many roads were built by them, cemeteries were built by the comunidades, then health was looked by the comunidades. All these government functions were imposed on the comunidades. Comunidades are basically agricultural institutions to get money for agriculture. So actually they were burdened during the Portuguese time itself.
The Marathas and the Portuguese were constantly at war for about 100 years, on and off. Shivaji came here, his son invaded Goa, the later Marathas invaded Goa. Now when the Marathas came here, the Portuguese needed economic resources to fight the Marathas. And whenever, during these 4.5 centuries of Portuguese presence in Goa, whenever the Portuguese needed economic resources, they usually, the first source was the comunidades. They either increased the taxes or they asked for resources from the comunidades. And comunidades sometimes were not in a position to pay. When they were not in a position to pay, they asked for capital from convents, from confraternities, from Santa Casa de Misericordia, and sometimes from private individuals. Now, who would simply give money? So when this money was advanced by individuals to the comunidades, at that time they got what is meant by interest. Shares were pledged to them, and it is at this time that shares of village communities were pledged to individuals who were not members of the village communities but were wealthy capitalists.
Subsequently, we have two types of gaonkas, those who are having a hereditary right and those who were shareholders. Two types of comunidad. But basically, earlier it was called gaonkariya.
In 1649, the Portuguese government declared itself as Senhor Direito, that is the overlord of all the land.